I never thought a Saturday night would feel like the tipping point of my entire life. My name's Daniel, 36, and for the past 9 years, I've been married to Claire. On the surface, we seemed fine. Friends would tell me how lucky I was, how she had this laugh that could light up a room, how her smile seemed to stop traffic. And for the first few years, she was exactly that. We traveled, cooked together, and shared late-night conversations that lasted until the early hours. I wasn't perfect, far from it, but I gave my all, and for a while it seemed enough. But over time, the subtle cracks grew. Little things I once laughed off started to sting. The way she would roll her eyes at my jokes, not with playful teasing, but with a quiet irritation I couldn't ignore. The evenings where I'd suggest a walk or a quiet dinner, and she'd sigh like it was a chore, her eyes glued to her phone. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Work stress, she must be tired. Yet, the more I gave, the more distant she became. The warmth that once existed slowly turned into a cold routine, a predictable pattern of indifference. I remember the night I first felt it fully. The night I realized I could give everything and still be invisible. It was a Friday, and Claire had made plans to go out with her friends. I didn't mind. Or at least, I told myself I didn't. She was laughing with her girlfriends when she kissed me goodbye, her lips brushing mine briefly, almost reluctantly. I smiled, waved, and watched her leave, feeling an odd mixture of relief and dread. The house felt impossibly quiet once she was gone. I walked from room to room, noticing how empty it all seemed. Her absence highlighted the silence that had been creeping in for months. The silent dinners, the muted TV shows we no longer watched together, the quiet contempt and casual words she tossed my way. I sat in the living room, thinking about all the times I had bent over backward for her. I had stayed up late when she worked on projects, done laundry she forgot to finish, cooked meals she barely touched, and even rearranged my schedule to accommodate hers. And yet, her gratitude never came. The warmth I sought had vanished, replaced with distance, so sharp it cut through me every time I tried to bridge it. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a phase, maybe she was stressed, maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't overreacting. I was finally seeing what had been there all along. I was no longer wanted, not truly, not emotionally, not in the way a marriage should feel. As I sat on the couch, replaying years of quiet neglect in my mind, a strange clarity began to form. If I continued to stay, I would slowly lose myself. I would continue being a ghost in my own home, offering love that would never be returned. And for what? For appearances? For empty words that meant nothing? That realization hit harder than any argument, any fight we had ever had. I knew that if I stayed another day without action, I'd be giving up my dignity, my peace, and my sense of self. That night, I decided something I hadn't dared consider for months. I was leaving. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. I planned it with the quiet precision of someone who'd been pushed to the edge. I packed a duffel bag with the essentials: clothes, my laptop, phone charger, a few sentimental items that I couldn't leave behind. I didn't take much. No dramatic gestures, no shouting, no confrontation. I wanted nothing more than to step out of the suffocating weight that had settled over my life and finally breathe. Each item I placed in the bag felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been buried beneath years of trying to make a love that had already died work. I glanced around the house one last time. The familiar walls, once comforting, now felt like a cage, and I knew that once I left, nothing would ever be the same. Then, as if the universe had orchestrated it, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire. Just a picture of her and her friends at the restaurant. All smiles, laughter frozen in pixels. A pang of anger hit me. That's when the final spark ignited. For so long, I had assumed she would notice my absence, that my loyalty and patience would compel her to care. But the truth was glaringly obvious. She would continue without me, blissfully unaware of the void she left. And that's when I realized something terrifyingly liberating. I didn't need her acknowledgement. I didn't need her to chase me, beg me, or even notice. I only needed myself. By the time she was out enjoying her night, I was already in my car, engine humming softly in the driveway. I drove without a destination, letting the city lights blur past, letting the quiet roar of the tires on asphalt fill the emptiness that had settled in my chest. There was no anger, no regret, just a sharp clarity that this was my moment to reclaim my life. Every street I passed, every traffic light I waited at, reminded me that this decision wasn't about abandoning love. It was about reclaiming my own existence from a relationship that had long ceased to nurture me. The night stretched endlessly ahead, full of uncertainty, but for the first time in months, I felt alive, awake, and undeniably free. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, the city lights giving way to the quiet suburbs, then stretches of dark highway. My mind replayed every conversation, every small rejection, every subtle dismissal that had led me here. It wasn't about one night or one fight. It was 9 years of feeling invisible in the person's life I once thought would be my forever. And yet, strangely, the further I drove, the lighter I felt. The weight of expectation, of silent endurance, was slowly lifting. I pulled into a small, dimly lit motel just off the highway. Nothing fancy, but enough to let me sit in silence and breathe without the suffocating feeling of walls closing in. I left the bag in the room and sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't fear, it was clarity. For the first time in years, I realized that leaving wasn't an escape. It was a reclaiming of myself. It was the first step toward living a life that wasn't dictated by someone else's indifference. Around midnight, the phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Just 3 words. "Where are you?" My chest tightened, but I didn't reply. She could ask, but I didn't owe her an immediate answer. I didn't want to explain my decision to someone who had long stopped seeing me. Minutes later, another buzz. This time it was a call. I let it ring, then sent it straight to voicemail. The night stretched, quiet except for the soft hum of the motel's air conditioning. And as silence settled in, I allowed myself to reflect. Over the next few days, I stayed mostly off the grid. Friends were curious, but I kept my answers vague. Needed some space. I told a few, and it was true, though it didn't capture the full weight of what I was doing. In the quiet, I realized how much of myself I had given away, how much I had compromised for a love that had long since stopped giving in return. I hadn't just lost intimacy or attention. I had lost pieces of myself along the way, little by little, always rationalizing, always hoping. Then came Thursday. Claire returned, laughing with the same group of friends, oblivious to the absence she had created. I had arranged to meet one friend, Mark, who lived not far from my temporary hideout. I wanted perspective, a grounding voice. Mark was older, divorced, and had been to the type of silent unraveling I was now experiencing. Over coffee, I recounted the whole story, every small neglect, every subtle dismissal, every night spent feeling unwanted. Mark nodded quietly, occasionally muttering, "You're not crazy. That's not love anymore. That's neglect." Returning from Mark's, I drove past my old house. The lights were on, laughter spilling from the open windows. Claire's friends were still there, oblivious to the emptiness she had left behind. I realized then that leaving hadn't caused shock or desperation in her. It had caused nothing. She had assumed I would wait, silently endure, and that certainty had been her comfort. The truth hit me with a mixture of anger and amusement. She had never actually valued my presence. She had only valued its predictability. Later that evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitant, I answered. "Daniel? It's Sarah, Claire's friend. Listen, I need to tell you something." Her voice was trembling, urgent. She told me she had overheard Claire talking on the phone, a conversation I hadn't expected. Claire wasn't just indifferent. She was planning to start seeing someone new immediately. Someone she had flirted with months ago, while pretending everything was fine at home. The realization was like ice in my veins. Every slight, every cold shoulder, every dismissive word suddenly had a new weight. It wasn't laziness or stress. It was preparation for a life without me. I listened quietly, letting Sarah spill everything. She didn't ask for action, didn't demand intervention, just the truth. And in that moment, I felt no anger, only clarity. Leaving had been the right choice. The only choice, the one that preserved the pieces of me Claire had long ignored. I thanked Sarah, and as I hung up, I realized I wasn't running from heartbreak. I was stepping toward freedom. A week later, I returned to the house, not to reconcile, not to argue, but to retrieve a few personal items. Claire wasn't home. I walked through rooms that had been mine as well as hers, touching nothing, noticing everything. The living room where we had first kissed, the kitchen where arguments had simmered silently, the bedroom where so many nights had felt like a desert. I saw it all with new eyes. No anger, no regret, only the understanding that I had finally left a life that no longer had room for me. By the time I walked out with my final box of things, I felt a strange, bitter peace. I didn't look back, didn't glance at the windows, didn't expect a call, a chase, or even recognition. The life I had thought I'd lost was actually just waiting for me to reclaim it. I drove away into the night, headlights cutting through the darkness, and for the first time in years, I felt fully awake, fully alive, fully myself. I had left while she thought I'd stay, and in doing so, I had found a freedom she could never take away.